Have you ever thought about having a boxing, Muay Thai or MMA fight? Or do you just want to integrate some of that training into your hybrid training routine? Today, I'm going to be discussing my experience with Muay Thai training and training up for a inter-club Muay Thai fight last year and how I integrated this into my training routine at the time, some of the challenges I faced, some of the benefits, my thoughts towards how I'd integrate combat sports into my current training routine, and how you can integrate a combat sport into a hybrid training routine so you can see results across the board. If you haven't checked out my previous two videos on bodybuilding and powerlifting, be sure to check them out after watching this video here today. And if you're enjoying my content and want to stay up to date in future, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with my latest videos. Let's discuss my experience with Muay Thai training and my training for an inter-club fight in 2023. So to kick things off, I want to discuss the fact that growing up, I never saw myself as a fighter. I had mates who loved getting into fights, but I was never really an aggressive kid, and I really struggled as a kid to strike up the courage to stand up for myself at times. And getting into a combat sport is actually something that I would recommend for anyone with kids or anyone who is struggling with self-confidence. I'm sure that having a combat sport under my belt growing up would have been very useful to be more confident with myself and maybe stand up for friends or my family at times if I ever saw the need be. So just prior to becoming a personal trainer, I had this point in time where I really had that transformational process in my life where I left drinking, drugs, and even old friend groups and an old partner behind to move forward with my life and grow and start to discover the person that I wanted to be. Thankfully, one of the mates that I did keep around invited me to come along to a local Muay Thai gym. So this would have been back in about 2015, 2016 that I started training down at Bulldog Gym in Brisbane. So I did love the high intensity style of pad work that we were doing in the gym. However, my technique was probably shocking at the time, and it really took a lot of hard work to get to the point last year where I actually felt quite confident with my technique. So as you do, you start to get a little bit better week by week as long as you're consistently showing up. But I do remember the first times I ever tried sparring, I was so timid, so scared, I would shell up. And obviously with the more advanced fighters, they wouldn't just go ham on you, they would just try to teach you something. Because for them, it's gonna be a shitty time too if you're not actually hitting back and you're not helping them become a better fighter as well. So that's another thing that I would lay down. If you are scared about joining up a combat sports gym, just know that these guys aren't all dickheads. A lot of them are actually quite humble because they know how to defend themselves, they know how to keep their ego in check, and they're there to help everyone else. All right, so to continue my training journey with Muay Thai, to be honest with you, I was so off and on for the better half of the journey. Considering that I started back in 2016, there were so many times where I had months and months off, and then I'd eventually go back, train for a while, have some time off again. But the one thing that remained consistent was always my strength training, and I'd keep up some running here and there as well. It wasn't until about 2020, 2021, around the COVID time, that I started doing a little bit of shadow boxing, a little bit of pad work with my brother. Then the gym started to open back up. I started to get into a bit more pad work, back at training. One thing I did do is started to invest my own time getting up at stupid early times in the morning, like 2:30, 3 a.m, to go hit the bags at another commercial gym before I drove back to the gym where I actually worked at to train my clients. In this time frame, I was actually recording a lot of what I was doing, and I was starting to understand the common flaws with my own technique. Now that, in conjunction with the fact that I was holding pads both for boxing and for kickboxing for some of my clients, helps me to identify some of the common errors that other people make so I could understand it for myself as well. Now it wasn't until about 2022 that I actually got a lot more serious and I started getting a lot more consistent with my training. I started going back to the Muay Thai gym, and then at the end of 2022, I remember having a conversation at the Christmas party with one of the ex-pro fighters there, and then also my coach Steve. The fact was that I just needed to pull the trigger and commit to the initiation that you had to go through to become a fighter. So to become a fighter down at Bulldog Gym, you've got to be training 5 nights a week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday night, you're running 7Ks before you actually train. Then on Wednesday and Friday, you have sparring, but after sparring, you need to be doing your sprints with the other fighters as well. Now you have to do this for 4 weeks straight to get into fighters class. If you miss one day, you have to start it all again. Now, luckily enough, when it came to January 2024, I committed myself to this and I went through that 4 full weeks. Now, this training was some of the most grueling training that I've ever done. I had to build up so much mental toughness and resilience to bounce back and keep showing up for training each night. Now, obviously, it just wasn't for that month. That was the training plan for the fighters. So for the 6 to 7 months leading into my actual fight, that is how I was training. Now, throughout this journey, I was doing a bit of running. I was doing a lot of pad work. Something else we did was a lot of clinching as well. Now, I can can tell you I had a very sore neck getting used to this. In conjunction with that, the Wednesday and Friday nights being sparring, something that I really gained from my training was confidence in my own ability, because there were so many nights that I had to do hard sparring with one of the boys and I was so nervous beforehand, but each time I came out seeing that I could actually defend myself, I could take a good hit, I could throw a hit as well. Ultimately, one of the biggest things that I actually need to work on as a fighter was just confidence in my own ability. And I always remember Steve saying to me, back yourself. No matter where you are in life, you've just got to back yourself in your own abilities. Have the confidence that you can come out the other side. Now, when it came to my first actual fight, it was a bit of an anxious period. I'm pretty sure Steve tried to get me on a promotion and only one of the boys got on the card. However, mid-year, there was an inter-club fight, which was pretty much run like a promotion anyway at the gym it was at. It was a really well-run event at a really cool gym and there was heaps of great fights on. So when it came into the actual fight camp for this, training definitely intensified. Steve was starting to push us a lot more with our clinching and a lot more with our sparring. One of the best things that I actually got out of this training experience was that tough love coaching approach. Now, some people have a lot of things to say about this, but for me, I found that I responded to it really well. I would rather someone tell me how it is and keep me accountable for my actions than just sugarcoat things and try to be nice to me. Because at the end of the day, you are disservicing someone if you do that. So that is something that I always respected about Steve as a coach. Now, even though it was challenging at times, all of the fighters respected this about Steve. And I think to this day, we're stronger people because of it. So as it got closer and closer to the fight, I was obviously keeping up my training. The sparring got harder, which was good because this really prepared me for the fight. In actual fact, I wasn't that nervous the night that I had my fight because I'd been more nervous the nights that we had sparring previously. Now, prior to having the fight, obviously I had to go through a weight cut. Diving into a calorie deficit and cutting weight for a fight, in particular in those last 2 weeks, is a fucking miserable experience. So at the end of the fight camp, you obviously have a taper week. So the week of the actual fight, I think the hardest session was probably on the Monday night and it wasn't really that crazy. And then we just dialed things down for the week. I had my last little acute weight cut where I lost a fair bit of weight and I actually wound up fighting at 78 kilos. So we did a 24-hour weigh-in, which was on the Thursday night, and then we fought on the Friday night. Now, it's a pretty interesting experience getting ready for a fight. So I was obviously doing all those cliche things. I was getting myself in the zone, I was listening to music, but mostly I just tried to enjoy the experience and have a good time. And I was actually pretty excited for this experience. There was a lot of adrenaline pumping. Once I started hitting the pads, I felt really good too. After that taper week and after refueling, my body was ready to go. I walked out to No Sleep Till Brooklyn by the Beastie Boys, which is a bit of a banger. And it was really good because I had a lot of friends and family down there to support me and obviously teammates and members of the gym as well. So throughout this next bit, I'm actually going to upload a few videos from the fight. And I'm even going to upload the fact that on our first initial contact, I wound up getting an 8 count. So I came in, dropped my hands, didn't defend myself, and I wound up getting knocked down. So as I got up, I knew I just had to get ready and knew this guy was going to be coming straight back for me. Now, watching the videos back throughout this fight, I always get angry at myself because I knew there were so many opportunities and so many things that I didn't go for because I was scared I was going to get hit on the tail end of me coming in for something. I think technically I would have been a much better fighter. I just didn't have the confidence. And it honestly took a couple of big hits from this guy for me to understand that he did not give a fuck how I left that ring. So had I not got 8 counted, I'm not sure how the results would have went for the fight. I got a fair few solid leg kicks on this guy, as you can see, but he also managed to get a few nice big headshots on me. Like I said, it's so frustrating to watch back because there's so many little shots or instances where I knew I could have thrown the head kick or the overhand, whatever shot it was, but I just didn't capitalize on it. Now, given the fight was only 3 by 2-minute rounds, this thing flew by. Once the bell went off and the fight was over, one thing that I do love about watching fighting is the respect between fighters. So it was great after going at it for 6 minutes just to give this guy a handshake, congratulate him on his job, and he wound up taking away the win. Now, obviously you don't want to go into your first fight with a loss, but I also didn't come out of it beating up myself too much as well, because I could see the main mistakes that I made were based off my own confidence in my abilities. And I'm sure given more time, effort, and practice in the ring and having more fights, these are things that you can start to work on and improve on and become a better fighter. Now, about 5 minutes post-fight, I went to go find my girlfriend at the time, and I was all smiles, giving people's handshakes, and then my ankle just started aching. So I think I got checked at 1 or 2 points, but also just that bone-on-bone contact with your kicks really does some damage to the muscles, tendons, and the bone as well. My left shin wound up being sore for about 8 to 10 weeks after the fight, and I still have a little calcified lump there to this day. Now, after the fight, I wound up having a week off training. Now, I did start to get back into training after a while, and I think there was talk of getting us on another card, but at this point with the training I was continuing to do and how I was running my business, I did go see the GP, I got some bloods done, and it turned out that I was anemic once again. I wasn't sure where my hormone levels were at, and I was also having some issues with with my digestive health as well. So I was just very low energy and finding myself constantly fatigued. Now, to be honest with you, I don't want to justify this, because if I truly wanted to be a fighter and continue fighting, I would have done everything within my power to do that. But I did tell my coach that I was planning to move my business to another gym, and I want to focus on that as well as my online coaching. And it's totally understandable that if a fighter doesn't have full commitment to you, it's not worth putting your time into them as a coach. So I wound up just continuing Muay Thai training, and every now and again, I still keep up a little bit to this day. Whether I go down to the gym for a little bit of sparring, I do a little bit of shadow boxing or bag work myself. Now that we've finished the lengthy story of how I got into fighting and what the experience was like training up for the fight, let's talk about some of the challenges that I actually had in the process. So you're going to see a consistent trend across these past couple of videos with the challenges that I always faced when it came to training for a certain event. And it always comes down to your training, nutrition, recovery, and your mindset. So when it came to the training side of things, it was so hard to manage my training load because there's such a high volume of training when it comes to training for a Muay Thai fight. So given I was training 5 nights a week for about 2 hours a night, and then I was doing 3 strength sessions in a week, plus I was running my own personal training business, when it came to balancing my training, the biggest fallout was managing my fatigue. Now, one of the biggest changes that I had to make with my training was reducing the intensity and training volume when it came to my strength training. So whilst I had a lot to gain when it came to my plyometric exercises and developing more speed and power, when it came to strength and muscle mass, I was just trying to maintain what I could. So one of the biggest challenges that you're probably going to face when it comes to integrating combat sports or training for a combat sport is managing your actual training load to offset how much fatigue that you're actually carrying. And this might mean planning in deloads into your training, or pulling back or prioritizing either your strength, endurance, or combat sports training. You could do this by reducing the amount of sessions you're doing, or you could do this by reducing the actual time or the volume and intensity of the training that you're doing for each given session. Now, when it comes to the nutrition side of things, when it comes to fueling yourself for combat sports or integrating combat sports training into a hybrid training routine, again, you need to make sure that you are adequately fueling your training so you can perform and recover. Now, given my background in personal training and in sports nutrition, I had a decent idea of how much energy I was expending and then how much I would actually need to be consuming. So based on this fact, I was managing my nutrition as well as I could. During the warmer months though, one of the biggest struggles that I had was actually maintaining my hydration. I was waking up very dehydrated in the mornings. Now, because I had a short time from actually finishing training and going to bed, I didn't have a whole lot of time to get fluids in. So I'd actually keep some water beside my bed in the middle of the night in case I woke up so I could have a drink. So when it comes to the recovery side of things, alongside managing fatigue, when it comes to combat sports training, you really need to look out for the fact that you're going to be getting a lot of contact injuries as well. So there were times that I had to be smarter with what I was doing with my strength training. If I had picked up an injury from sparring or just hitting the pads or maybe even clinching. Now, the biggest challenge I found when it came to recovery when integrating combat sports training with my strength training was the same thing with managing the training load itself, so the totality of the training volume. So given that I was spending more time training, I had less time to recover. So this is where it really came down to prioritizing not only my nutrition and eating enough, but also making sure that I was getting enough sleep as well. So for me, this meant that I was actually prioritizing my schedule to allow for 8 hours sleep every night. And also, as I was training for this fight, this was probably one of the only points in my training history that I never trained on the weekends. And this was because when I got to the end of the training week, I was so fatigued that I just needed this time to recover to get into my next week. Now, the other thing that I'm going to add into recovery is the fact that we need to switch off from our fight or flight sympathetic nervous system to our rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system. So something that I have always found supportive of this is practicing a little bit of breath work on a daily basis. Now, typically for me, I usually only do about 10 minutes in the morning, but this sets a really nice tone for the day. As you start to become a bit more accustomed to this, you start to notice that you're more in control in your breath, and in situations where you start to stress out more, you become more of the observer. You pull yourself back, start to focus on your breathing a little bit, and instead of getting all that nervous system arousal, you can bring yourself back down. And this is a super important component when it comes to managing fatigue. Better yet, you could incorporate some yoga nidra or breath work at night time to help you with your sleep and calming down and setting that rest and digest parasympathetic nervous state before you go to bed. All right, so when it comes to the mindset side of things, there's obviously a lot of challenges that presented themselves when it came to training for a fight. Not only just training for the fight, but the training in itself. So there was many nights when I was actually driving to training from work and I just wanted to drive straight home, eat and go to bed. But I had so much accountability to show up to training for my coach and my teammates that I got myself through the door every night. Realistically, the big challenge was just being consistent and having the cognitive load to take myself from A to B. Because usually once I started running and got into training, once you're going through the motions, it's not too bad at all. And I always say this to clients and members of the gym. A lot of the time, the hardest thing for them is just to get to the gym. Once you're actually there through the door, things are a lot smoother. And I don't think I've ever really heard someone say that they've regretted a training session. Now, the other thing I want to discuss here is the main reason that I got into the training as well was presenting myself with a challenge so I can improve my self-confidence, improve my sense of confidence in my ability to do things that I had not done before. Given the fact that I hadn't been in numerous fights, let alone a planned fight in the ring, let alone sparring people 2 nights a week, this whole training journey and a fight was a massive test on my self-confidence. I was constantly exposing myself to uncomfortable situations when it came to sparring and training. And when it came to the fight, like I said, I was quite prepared, so I actually wasn't as nervous. And even though the fight was over in a blink, the feeling of accomplishment that I had, not even winning the fight, but just getting there, showing up, not pulling out and finishing what I planned out to do, gave me such a massive boost to my confidence within myself. Now, for the majority of things in my life now, when I actually set my eyes on something, I know that I've got the ability to follow through. It's just a matter of not whether I'm going to have the time, effort, and consistency to do it. And that is quite literally the case for anyone watching this. You may be starting at different points, but you will have the physical and psychological capacity to do what you set your mind to. And provided you're willing to put in the time, effort, and consistently show up, I don't see any reason why you can't do whatever you put your mind to. Now, I just want to add on how this self-confidence actually impacted my life. When it comes to how I talk to people or how I let people talk to me now, I'm definitely more selective with who I have conversations with. And if I don't like the content in a conversation, or if I feel someone's just being rude or disrespectful, I'm not gonna have much time for them. But I don't really find myself in that many situations with conversations now where I feel like someone's trying to walk all over me. And as pessimistic as it may sound, you are gonna find many people like that in your life. There are some beautiful people out there in the world, but there are a lot of people who will take advantage of you, either consciously or subconsciously, as soon as they get the chance. And if you can't stand up for yourself, they will walk all over you. Now, this could be someone at work, it could even be a friend or a family member, and sadly, it could even be a partner as well. But the more confidence and self-respect that you have for yourself, people will start to see this. So I've already started to talk on, I guess, the benefit side of things, so let's continue this chat now. So leading off of the psychological benefits that I found with this training and training up for a fight, I think combat sports are not only going to increase your self-confidence, which can positively impact your professional and your personal life, but it's also going to help you to build a lot more mental toughness and resilience. So things that used to bother you in the past start to become more trivial matters. And in moments where you do feel a bit of aggression from someone, either verbally or physically, you back yourself a bit more and you start to conduct yourself verbally and physically with a bit more confidence. All right, so when it comes to the physical benefits, so when it came to actually training up for this fight, I got to the leanest point that I've ever been. Now, whilst I didn't build a lot of strength, I definitely became a lot more powerful. And my ability to express that power in different planes of movement definitely started to improve. Now, the biggest physical benefit I saw though was just in my skill set as a fighter. Now, one thing in addition that I am going to add here is whilst there are a lot of physical benefits to combat sports, you need to be aware that this is a combat sport. There is a serious threat of injury. Now, whilst I came out pretty unscathed, one of the biggest things that you need to consider when it comes to combat sports is traumatic brain injuries. So you should be taking things like concussions quite seriously, as we are only now starting to see some of the emerging evidence in athletes competing in contact sports and combat sports when it comes to brain injuries. As a wrap from the physical and psychological benefits, I would say I was probably in my fittest shape up to that point, and psychologically I definitely felt at my most confident and strongest. Let's discuss how we actually train for a combat sport or integrate combat sports into our hybrid training routine. As a general rule of thumb, it's always going to come down to your priority. If you're training to be a fighter or compete in combat sports, then any strength and endurance training that you're doing should only be supporting your actual sport. Now, typically for striking sports, the main things that you're going to be looking for is increasing maximal strength and power. You're also going to be looking at certain exercises that help you to prevent injuries. For example, something that I was doing was some neck strengthening exercises. So when it came to my clinching and getting punched in the face, I had a more sturdy neck to absorb force with. So when it comes to actually building strength and power though, we do want to focus on building both lower and upper body strength and power, but also rotational strength and power as well, as your trunk is going to be the link between your lower and upper body and is going to be transferring a lot of force. So if you're someone that is training for a combat sport, whether that be boxing, Muay Thai, MMA, or Jiu-Jitsu, when it comes to integrating some strength training, you'll be perfectly fine integrating 2 or 3 sessions into your training week. If you can separate your strength training from your actual skills training, that's going to allow for a bit more time to recover, so you're getting more out of each session. However, if you have to do strength training before or after some of your skills training sessions, just be mindful of the fact that one will impact the other. Now, if you are a combat sports athlete, but maybe you're looking into doing more hybrid training and walking away from your sport forward a little bit. Instead of doing skills training 5 or 6 days a week, if you do want to pick up more strength training and running, it's perfectly fine to drop back down to 2 or 3 sessions in a week, and you'll probably be surprised to how much skill you actually hang on to and maybe some improvements that you still make. And this is going to allow for more space in your week to actually start to work on your strength training and your endurance training. Now, if you're someone that already does strength and or endurance training and you want to integrate some combat sports training into your routine, start by adding 1 to 2 combat sports training sessions a week. You might be able to fit 3 in, but it just depends how much strength and endurance training you're actually doing. As for the combat sports athlete, you just need to consider where you place this training throughout the week. If you start putting it before your strength and endurance sessions, then you can expect that it's going to impact your performance in these sessions. So just think of what you want your priority to be. And if you're at any of these cases, consider your overall training volume. If it does turn out to be quite high, maybe 6 to 8 or more sessions in a week, I'll definitely start to implement a deload every 4 to 6 weeks. However, you can reactively deload and start to take a little bit of time off or have an easier week of training if you start to notice yourself getting sick, tired, fatigued, or your training performance just isn't improving. Now, for any of these cases, what I would recommend when it comes to your strength training is having a full body approach. This means incorporating a squat, a hinge, a push, a pull, a core movement, maybe a single leg exercise. And you could do this across 2 to 3 sessions and maybe add 1 or 2 accessory or isolation exercises at the end. But you'll just need to consider how you respond to this, and if you start to get too run down or you're picking up injuries, you may need to reduce that back a little bit. Other things to consider would be incorporating some plyometric exercises to develop a little bit more power. So remember, when you look at your training as a whole, you should be looking at the total volume of training sessions that you're doing. So this can be the frequency, the amount of sessions that you're doing in a week, the actual time spent or the amount of sets that you're doing in these training sessions, and how hard these training sessions are. If you start to notice that you keep running into problems, this is where you need to adjust your training and dial it back a little bit. Once we start adding more pieces to the training puzzle, it does get a bit more complex, so I don't want to give too many general guidelines here. So feel free to comment or message me directly on Instagram if you do have more individualized questions that you would like me to give you an answer to. So let's talk about some of the common mistakes that people make when it comes to combining combat sports into a hybrid training routine. One of the biggest mistakes that I made and that I see other people make is trying to train like a bodybuilder or powerlifter when it comes to integrating combat sports into their training routine. You're just not going to have the resources or the capacity for recovery to handle those sorts of training when you're also trying to train for another sport. So one thing that you'll need to consider here is the type of training that you're doing. You'll want to be taking a bit more of a sports performance approach, and this would be full body training, but also targeting some of the muscle groups or movements that possibly are neglected when it comes to bodybuilding and powerlifting training, and that are more specified to the sport that you're actually looking to compete in or train for. Another big mistake when it comes to integrating such a complex routine is obviously nutrition. As always, you want to make sure that you are adequately fueling yourself. Even when it comes to weight class sports where you're actually cutting for a fight, your goal should be to eat as little as possible. You should be working with a professional like a sports nutritionist, or a dietitian, someone who is capable of getting you to your end goal safely. To work out how much you actually need to eat, you need to be looking at how much energy you're expending and therefore how much you need to be consuming. You might want to wear some wearable devices to track your overall energy expenditure and movements throughout the day, and use something like MyFitnessPal to track your nutrition to see how much you're actually eating. Now, you'll want to aim for calorie maintenance or even a slight surplus when it comes to improving performance or increasing muscle mass. When it comes to cutting weight or reducing body fat, you want to be in a calorie deficit. When it comes to the recovery side of things, you've just got to remember that with a more complex training routine and less time for recovery, you need to prioritize the time that you actually have to recover. This means ensuring that you have a schedule set up where you can get your 8 hours of sleep per night, and maybe using things like breath work in the morning and the evening to help regulate your nervous system. Having adequate energy and nutrient availability, as I've also just recommended, is going to be another crucial factor when it comes to recovering well enough to perform. Now, the biggest mistake that I see when it comes to mindset is thinking that you're superhuman. Thinking that you can handle all the training in the world and eat as little as possible. I think typically something that I've seen in combat sports is that there is this tough mentality, and whilst you need it to be in a combat sport, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be managing your training load or managing your nutrition and your recovery just for the sake of keeping this tough persona. If anything, it's going to take away from your fighting ability, not add to it. Being more meticulous with your training load, your nutrition, and your recovery is only going to make you a better fighter, not a worse one. All right, that's it for today, guys. So I hope you enjoyed getting some brief insights into my experience and my interest with getting into Muay Thai training and having an amateur Muay Thai fight. Obviously, I talked about some of the challenges that presented themselves, some of the benefits that I found physically and psychologically, how you could integrate combat sports training together with strength and endurance training, and also some of the common mistakes that I made or I see people make when it comes to having this complex training approach. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with my content to come out in future, and hit the like button if you took a little bit of value out of today's video. Now, if you are someone who is looking to build a leaner, stronger, and more endurable body, and you're not sure how to manage your training load, your nutrition, your recovery, you need help with your mindset or possibly behavioral changes as well, feel free to message me on Instagram or apply through my website for my Hybrid Transformation 2.0 program, where I help you to build a leaner, stronger, and more endurable body so you can live with more self-confidence. Thanks for watching the video today, guys, and until next time, see ya.